and welcome to the Bring Me My Books podcast. I'm Kristi, Cain, and I'm here with my co-host, Travis Lowe, and we're going to talk about books. It's one of our favorite things to talk about. But before we get too far into the books we're going to be discussing, I would love for us to talk about why another podcast, because there are so many podcasts out there. But this is something we've been talking about doing for a little while now. So, Travis, in your mind, why Bring Me My Books?
Yeah, like you said, there's so many podcasts, there's so many things that are out there, and I don't think I would want to do something except that this is something that makes me so excited. Like we were discussing before the show started about this morning, I was driving in and I just couldn't wait to get here and to sit down and get to talk about what we've been reading, about what we've been up to. And it's something that I know that I'm looking forward to, that I'm going to enjoy. And I hope that it's something where we get to invite other people into this world and invite them into some of these books that we've discovered or that we're discovering. And I think it can be so much fun.
I do too. And I think we run into each other occasionally at events, and we can talk in just a few minutes about what we do and how that happens. But I think whenever we see each other, what we end up doing is talking about the books that we're reading. But we don't ever even get a chance, just as friends, to talk about them in depth. So this is an opportunity. On a selfish side, it's a chance for us to get to talk about our books a little bit more in depth, the ones we're reading. But then we've also talked about how we really believe that Christianity should be a religion full of readers.
Yes.
And you found a great sermon, and I don't want to spoil it because I want you to be able to share it, about why Christians should be reading. And so will you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's one of the things that's that really marks Christianity, that we're people of the word, obviously, but as it's developed through time, we're people of the book. We were the people who really kind of invented this whole idea of the printing press. And Christians have always been readers. And I think that's something that I hope that we don't lose in this age, and it's something that I find really important. But we came up with this idea of Bring Me My Books from a passage of Scripture, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13. Paul is in prison, and you can imagine what it was like. It was near the end of his life. He talks about his life being poured out like an offering. And he's writing to his son and the Lord, his friend. And the thing that's important that's on his mind, he says, I need you to bring me a couple things. Could you bring me my coat? I think it's something that probably brought him comfort. He was cold. I think that was probably fairly practical. Yeah. And then he says, and bring me my books. Yeah. And that just hit me because books have always been this place that... It's kind of funny, like I didn't read a whole lot growing up, but there was a stage, I was probably 19, 20 years old, and going through some hard things in life, and I was able to find in books like C.S. Lewis says, I read to know that I'm not alone. It was like I was able to find companions on this road of life when life was hard and didn't make sense. And I imagine that in the same way, Paul's in this place where it's tough. Yeah. But I found a sermon by Spurgeon, who is always just so tremendous in the way that he words things. But he starts out, and he's always... he can be pretty comical when he's like addressing something he believes in so strongly. And he gets to this part where Paul says, bring me my books. And he says, we don't know what the books were about. We can only form some guesses as to what these parchments were. Paul had a few books which were left. Perhaps they were even wrapped in his coat. And Timothy was to carefully bring them to him. And then he says, even an apostle must read. And then he kind of picks on some folks. He says, some of our very ultra-Calvinistic brethren think that a minister who reads books and studies for his sermon must be a very deplorable specimen of a preacher. A man who comes up into the pulpit, professes to take his text on the spot and talks any quantity of nonsense is the idol of many people today. If he will speak without premeditation or pretend to do so and never produce what they call a dish of dead men's brains, oh, now that's a preacher. But then he turns around and he says, how rebuked are they by the apostle? He is inspired, and yet he wants books. He's been preaching at least 30 years, and yet he wants books. He has seen the Lord, and yet he wants books. He has had a wider experience than most men, and yet he wants books. He's been caught up into the third heaven and heard things which it is unlawful for man to utter, yet he wants books. He's written a major part of the New Testament, yet he wants books. The apostle says to Timothy, and so he says to every one of us, give yourself unto reading. The man who never reads will never be read. He who never quotes will never be quoted. He who will not use the thoughts of other men's brains proves that he has no brain of his own. Whether what is true of ministers is true of all people, we are quite persuaded that the very best way that you can spend your leisure time is to either be reading or praying. You may get much inspiration from books, which afterwards you may use as a true weapon in your Lord and Master's service. Paul cries, bring me my books.
Yeah.
And we say, join in the cry. I love that so much.
I love that too. And I think one of the things, before we started the podcast, we were like, okay, what do we want this podcast to feel like? If we could come up with an emotion. And I think we see it even in this letter, and it was like joy.
Absolutely.
Like, we want people to find joy in reading, to find joy in discussing books. And some of the books we're going to read and some we're going to talk about that in a minute, but are heavy,
right.
And are really cause you to take back and think and step back and think about things. But we want people to help them find the joy even in that and in the reading. And but I think even with all the hard words and the criticism that,
right.
that Spurgeon gives, you see that joy. And so I hope that our listeners, they will find joy as they read this. Okay, so we talked about where we found the name and kind of what we want it to be. But what do you just personally, when you think about this podcast, because this is the very first episode of Bring Me My Books, what do you hope will be some of the end results?
Well, number one, that we get to share this with people.
Yeah.
I really, there's few things in life I enjoy as much as giving somebody a book. Yeah. In hopes that they'll read it and that they'll get to experience what I experienced. Mm-hmm. And I think we all experience it different based on where we are in life and what's going on. But to me, this is just, it just flows from that natural place of me grabbing a book off of my bookshelf and handing it to somebody and say, here, read this.
Yeah.
And then I would love to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things in the world. And that's what I want this to be to everybody that listens, to everybody that watches. It's just us grabbing a book off of our bookshelf and saying, I liked this one.
Uh-huh.
Why don't you read this and let's talk. And if it becomes that, I look forward to it just being me and you talking, but I really hope that it becomes something more to where we hear from people and we run into people when we're out and we get to know people and we connect around these books that we picked. And you mentioned that we're going to be revealing the books that we're going to be reading for the first year. And I can't wait to to just put this out and see where it goes.
I'm not sure what it says about how nerdy we are,
right?
that we get so excited about books. But we do have 5 great books, some of which we've read and some of which we haven't.
Right.
And I would say one of the things that I'm excited about is I talk to people sometimes, and if I ask them, what are you reading right now? And sometimes they look kind of sheepish, I don't know, I want to read, but I don't read. And I think one piece of that is it's overwhelming. You walk into a bookstore and there are just a million books you could choose from, and it's hard to know where to go. And so in one way, I want to think, okay, you came to 2 people who love to go find a good book to read. And we've read a lot and we might make a mistake sometime. We might pick a book and we might end up both disliking it.
Right.
I don't know. That's possible. But I think, we'll help give a guide for that. But also, one of my favorite adult experiences, there was a period of time where I would meet with some friends of mine. They would invite a lot of couples to their house. And so we often did it in the fall and early winter when it was cold enough for a fire. And so we'd be sitting around, and inevitably somebody in that group would say, hey, what are you reading right now? And it would turn into this really great discussion of what we're reading, why we're reading it, and what we're learning. And I think I want to have that with more people, and we get to do this. It just feels like very fun perk of our jobs that we get to do this. But like you said, I hope that more people will come in and talk to us on social media and things like that. And we'll just have this really fantastic, big conversation about the books that we're reading. And the other thing I would say is I do hear some people say they wish they had people speaking into their lives. And I remember saying this to a mentor of mine when I was in graduate school. It was actually our pastor's wife, and we were talking about how important it is to have people speaking into you. And she said, most of my life, she had not had physical people speaking into her. And so when she didn't, it was like God always brought the right book along. And that author through the book became a mentor to her. And so I kind of hope too that for people who are looking for someone to speak into their life, maybe they'll find that as we read these books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. Before we get to the big reveal for the 5 books for this year, let's talk a little bit about like what you do, what I do, and kind of how we merged what we do to come together for this podcast. So tell us what you do.
Sure. So in reference to this podcast, I am the host of Hope Words Writers Conference, which is a Christian writers conference in Bluefield, West Virginia. We started the conference about 5 years ago,
which is awesome, by the way. I love it.
Yeah, it's really incredible what's happened through Hope Words. It's been one of the biggest joys of my life, something I look forward to so much. Bluefield is where I was serving as pastor, and it's right on the border of Virginia, West Virginia, in the coal fields of West Virginia, and it was a place that had struggled a lot, suffered a lot of economic struggles. Kind of there was just a lot of hard things in the area, and we struggled being there. That people would come into Appalachia to kind of tell the story, and we always hated the way that they told our story.
Okay,
and so we. Robbie, my friend, we started this kind of in a way to help people tell stories of hope. And stories of hope don't ignore the harsh realities of life. Actually, we'll be talking about that kind of in the first book that we look to. Like, you have to understand the pain before you can really understand the hope. And so we just kind of approached it that way. But what blew us away, we were planning this to be a conference for people in Bluefield. But from the first year, people started coming from everywhere. And so last year, we had in person over 400 people from over 40 states, people from Canada. We had hundreds of people watch online. So it's really grown into this amazing thing where people come from all over the place to Bluefield, and it's not easy to get there. Like, there's no airport close. There's no easy way there, but there's something special that's happening there. And so it's been so much fun, and it really started for me. I love to read, and I said I would love to invite some of the authors that I like to read to Bluefield and just share Bluefield with them. Yeah. And it was kind of selfish for me. Like, I got to hang out with these authors. I got to spend time with them, and if other people came, that was a positive. But but what it's turned into has been so good. And then we also have a connection. I'm the president of the Extension Loan Fund with the IPHC, and so we serve together in some of those roles in the denomination as well.
That's right. And I work for LifeSprings Publishing, LifeSprings Resources, and we do a lot of publishing. In particular, we publish primarily curriculum for churches, but we also have a bookstore, an online bookstore, which has been one of you were talking about some of your favorite things you get to do for work. One of my favorite things is finding the new books that we're going to put online and make available and take to our events. And so, and one of our big emphases right now is biblical literacy, but that doesn't we don't just mean you only read the Bible, although we should be people of the book.
Yes.
Who are people of books, I think. And so I think one of the ways to get people excited and help them understand God's word is just to understand God's truth. And we find that in all sorts of books who are, believers are writing books, and sometimes in unexpected places. But so that we just kind of our love for books, and that the organizations we were with were also about books.
I think that's why this is so natural. Like what you've done and what you enjoy is finding books and sharing them. You said the bookstore with the publishing. And it was the same thing for me. Here were authors that I love, and how can I share them with the people around me? And I think that's what Bring Me My Books, that's the heart of it, is let's share books. Let's share these experiences with people. So I really look forward to it. I think it's going to be so much fun.
I think so too. Okay, well, up next is the big reveal for 2024.
The big reveal.
I know. So we're going to choose 5 books for 2024 and maybe have some surprises along the way. But 5 that are the big books. We're going to have a reading schedule. All of that. We'll tell you more about that in just a minute. But before that, we're going to take a quick word from some of our sponsors.
Situated in Bluefield, West Virginia, the Hopewards Writers Conference seeks to equip and encourage their patrons to tell stories of hope. This year's conference will focus on the question of living between cultures and the unique potential it holds for creativity. The conference will offer many exciting guest author speakers this year, and can't wait to learn what God has been speaking into their lives. Come with us and help us tell stories of hope. LifeSprings Resources is committed to providing innovative learning resources for the local church. Our products reflect our commitment to the development of new and innovative ways to experience scriptural truth. Whether you're looking for material for your small group, need new curriculum for Sunday school, or you're just trying to stock up on church supplies, we've got you covered. Look for us online at lifespringsresources.com or call us at 1-800-541-1376, and our friendly customer service team will be happy to assist you.
Welcome back to Bring Me My Books, and it is time for the reveal. So we've got 5 books. So in 2024, if you would like to read along with us, we're going to have a reading schedule that you can find on our social media sites. You can engage with us. There'll be opportunities to discuss the books, and you can follow along with us, like exactly the way that we have scheduled out, or you can kind of do your own thing. You can pick the books you want to read with or not. But I think this is when I have done like book challenges and things like that before, the big thing I was always waiting on, okay, what are the books you're going to be reading? Okay, so we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to talk about how we read the book. We're not going to talk too much about why we picked the book, because we'll do that when we get to the actual books. And if you're wondering, like, why would they pick that first, you're just going to have to wait and come back. So the very first book, so book number 1 of 2020, that's right, is A Hole in the World, and this author is actually a friend of yours.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Amanda?
Yeah, Amanda came to Hopewards in 2023, and that was the first time I met her, but she came with a group of folks. There's a group from the Chattanooga area and kind of in there that have writers group, and one of the guys came one year, and then the next year there was a handful, and I think they're going to be bringing a bus before long, but they invited Amanda, and one of the guys who I'd become friends with, he said, have you ever read any of Amanda's stuff? And I didn't even know that she wrote, and he said, you really need to read it. Yeah. And it's funny, at Hopewards, there's all kinds of writers, so everybody's giving you books, and everybody is telling you, and I try my best. I keep all the Hopewards writers' books, and I do my best to read them, but sometimes I get into them, sometimes I don't. But I picked up this book, and I don't know what it was. I connected with it right away. Amanda is an Appalachian writer. She lives there in the mountains. A lot of the stories just felt real similar to me. But she's a singer. She's a one of the pastors at her church, and just really been tremendous. But most people that I've asked, have you ever read this? Have you read Amanda? Most people haven't, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this. It's like we're getting to introduce this maybe to a lot of folks that have never had a chance to read her. So
yeah, and I think we have a good mix of that.
Yeah.
Like authors you might be familiar with and one. So that's book number 1. We'll start in January with that one. All right, you go for number 2.
Yes, number 2, we're going to be doing this book on Pentecost. And to be honest with you, I've not read this book. I don't think you've read this book either. The book is a part of a series of books on the church calendar. And they were put together and edited by Esau Macaulay. Dr. Macaulay is at Wheaton, and he came to Hope Words last year as one of our speakers. Tremendous writer. We talked about doing some of his books.
Yeah, and we might at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's put together this series. I think there's 5 of them on different seasons throughout the church. And we just thought it would be fun because the way the schedule is working out, it'd be right during the Pentecost season.
Yes.
We both come from Pentecostal backgrounds, and this is a season that, there's a lot of meaning, but there can also, there's a lot of conversation.
Yes.
Pentecostalism right now is... Ed Stetzer said it's not only the fastest growing movement in Christianity, but it's the fastest growing movement in the history of Christianity.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people are, what is this? And so we get to go to the season of Pentecost. The author is Emilio Alvarez, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope that it's things that I'm not thought of. I hope it's things that kind of stretch us and challenge us. So he comes from a more liturgical background. So I think that'll be different for me.
Yeah.
And I just can't wait to see what he has to say.
Well, I'm excited. It's a short book. It's very accessible, and I do so I spent a good bit of time in Pentecostal church growing up, and then I was part of an Anglican church for a long time too. So for me, I'm thinking it's going to meld those two worlds in a way that I'm very excited about. So that's book number 2. Then book number 3, we're going to hit our biggest book in the summer, which some people might wonder why, because we kind of toyed around, is it too big? But you love this book.
Oh, yeah.
My husband loves this book. This is one of the books that's been most recommended to me, and it's Culture Making by Andy Crouch. It's not a new book, but there's a brand new edition for this one. And so this is one you've read. I haven't, but it's Culture Making, Recovering Our Creative Calling. And you and I, after books, I would say maybe just the arts in general is something we're both real passionate about. Yep. So just the creativity, really, that's where I'm going. And maybe it has nothing to do with that because I haven't read, but I'm thinking it probably does. So
and
be in
it's
the summer.
Incredible. That was a paradigm-changing book for me. Oh my goodness, it just gave language to so many things. I remember at that time, I've actually been able to connect with Andy. He came to Hope Words, and we've done some other things together, but I remember reading that book and saying, I've got to share this with people. Okay. I've got to do something. And I was wondering if there was some kind of a small group study, something set up so that you could share it. And at the time, there wasn't anything, but there was a website on the back. And I go to the website, and there was a phone number. I called the phone number, and I was just trying to find resources. It's like I want to share this book. And so I called the phone number, and it rings one time, and then he goes, "This is Andy."
Oh, you got Andy.
Like the writer, Andy? And he was like, "Yeah, this is Andy." And I was like, I didn't even know what to say. I was like, I just finished Culture Making, and I want to share it with people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that was kind of how we connected. And he's been a tremendous friend, just a incredible guy. But I really believe that there's a section in there where he kind of tells the gospel story that I think is just one of the most powerful things that I've read. So I'm so excited to do that book.
That's awesome. All right, book number 4 is one of my all-time favorites. I just reread it again.
Yeah, book number 4, C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. This is when I told Kristi, I've read this book, but I went back and I started to flip through it, and I was like, I don't hardly even remember it. So it's been years for me. I'm a huge fan of C.S. Lewis, everything that he writes, and he's somebody that's been just like a companion for me throughout my entire Christian life. So he's somebody that I've turned to again and again. He's somebody that I've got to introduce my kids to, and from kind of his children's books as they're starting to grow up, and then Dane's just recently read Mere Christianity and kind of getting into that part of his writing. And so I'm excited about this book, but I'm excited about just sharing C.S. Lewis. So I think that's a huge part of it for me. Why do you say this is one of your favorites?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I like that we've included a novel, a story,
Right.
And so that was, of all the 5 books that we are promoting, this is the one that's fiction. I don't want to give too much. Every person that is introduced, and you get lots of new characters introduced, just causes you to reflect on kind of what your idols are, and what, how do I need to see what God might be working on me in a different angle. And I think it's because it's such a creative story, it's easier to kind of encounter those things than if you're just reading it. And so I guess one of the biggest things is it's just this fantastic story that keeps me engaged, that says a lot of things that other books say, but they tell it in story form. And a C.S. Lewis, though,
and we need to do more fiction.
We do.
In the future too.
Yep.
My kids both love Screw Tape Letters, and it's kind of the same thing. It introduces these concepts, and it's like it almost just makes you open your eyes like, oh, wow.
Yes. And I read Screw Tape Letters first, and I don't know which one I like more, but that one seems, I don't know, it just seemed like the right time for that one. Okay, and the last book we have this is one neither one of us have read, but we've both read things by this author. It's Humble Roots, How Humility Grounds and Nourishes Your Soul. This is also a friend of yours who's very involved in Hope Words, and if there's anything you want to say about that before we finish
Hannah
up.
Anderson. And Hannah lives in Appalachia. She's close to Bluefield. We got connected, I believe, the second year of Hope Words, and just became immediate friends. She is absolutely brilliant. One of the things that I always say to people that know Hannah pretty well, I always love to ask the question, when did you realize that Hannah's way smarter than you? There's always that moment that you come to when you hang around Hannah where you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I tell my kids that what I love about listening to Hannah, to reading Hannah, is that on any particular subject, you never know where she's going to go.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know where she's going to come from. I think I like that about writers that are kind of unpredictable.
Yeah.
Writers that might challenge you in this direction and then challenge you in this direction. There's not like there's this set agenda that they're always kind of trumpeting. So she's just absolutely brilliant. Everything that I've read, I love. This is one of her early books, and I'm so looking forward to going back and reading it. She's one that I like to introduce to folks to. I think a lot of people know Hannah. She's written for Christianity Today. She's written in a lot of magazines. Her books are broad sellers. But I think that, especially early on, a lot of people thought that her books maybe it was just where she was a female author, but they were written to women.
Yes, I think that. I think people do think that.
And that's just not. I don't think that's the case. So I really want to read this, and I would love to read this with other guys, hear what other guys think about it as they engage with her thoughts, because she's just tremendous. So I really look forward to that. And one thing that we might be able to do in the future, you mentioned that several of these folks I've known, I've got to know a little bit, but I think it'd be pretty fun to kind of invite them in and to get their take as we talk about the books.
I think that would be super exciting, and that's what I'm saying. We might have some surprises along the way. Well, that's the big book reveal for 2024. If you are interested in reading along with us, you can find more information on our social media sites. So just look for Bring Me My Books, and we'll be there engaging with you. We're also going to have some additional resources that you can find. But it really, I would say it's low pressure, but we hope that this will encourage encourage you and inspire you to start reading and to read along with us and dialogue. One of the things that I think is that people sometimes they read, but then they're looking for people to talk with those books about. And if you don't feel like you have anybody right where you live, this is a great community, a big community, we hope, that will be able to join in with us. Well, Travis, that's podcast number 1. We've done the reveal. And so we hope that you will join us again as we talk about our very first book, A Hole in the World, and follow along with us. We're going to do 3 different episodes for that, and you'll be able to just kind of see what we pull out of it, and then we hope that you'll dialogue with us as often as you're able. Thank you so much for joining us. Travis, thanks for doing this with me. Super excited about what's to come. And that's it for Bring Me My Books.